Imagine you're 8 miles into a backcountry hike in the Appalachian Mountains. You're deep enough that the trail has narrowed to a single track path through old-growth forest. There are no roads, no structures, no sign of civilization in any direction. You haven't seen another person in hours. The nearest building is a parking lot trailhead 7 miles behind you. And then, in a small clearing just off the trail, you see a staircase. Not a foundation. Not rubble. Not the remnants of a collapsed cabin. A staircase. Standing upright. Freestanding. No building attached to it. No walls, no floor, no roof. Just a set of stairs. 12, maybe 15 steps, rising from the forest floor to nothing. Clean. Intact. Some of them carpeted. Some of them hardwood. Some of them look brand new. They shouldn't be there. There is no rational reason for a staircase to be standing in the middle of a forest, miles from the nearest road in an area with no record of any structure ever being built. And yet, people keep finding them. Across the Appalachian Mountains, across national forests throughout the United States, and increasingly in wilderness areas around the world, hikers, rangers, and search and rescue workers keep reporting the same thing. Staircases in the woods, standing alone, going nowhere. And there is one rule that every person who works in the backcountry seems to know, even though nobody remembers who told them first. You do not climb them. You do not touch them. You turn around and you walk away. Tonight we're going to talk about where this phenomenon came from, what people have actually reported seeing, the theories that try to explain it, and why, after years of research, nobody has come up with an answer that accounts for everything. The modern awareness of the staircase phenomenon traces back to a series of posts on Reddit in 2014 and 2015. A user claiming to be a search and rescue officer, we'll call him the SAR poster, published a multi-part series describing his years of experience working in national forests. The posts were long, detailed, and written with a kind of flat procedural tone that made them feel less like fiction and more like an incident report someone had finally decided to make public. The series covered a lot of ground. Missing persons cases that didn't add up, objects found at impossible locations, sounds that defied explanation. But the detail that caught fire, the one that people latched onto and couldn't let go of, was the staircases. The SAR poster described finding them repeatedly throughout his career, freestanding staircases in the middle of the wilderness, miles from any structure, in areas with no historical record of development. He described them in a way that was unsettlingly specific. Some were wooden, some were stone, some were carpeted. Some looked old. Some looked like they'd been placed there that morning. They varied in size. Some were a few steps, others were full flights that rose 15 or 20 feet into the air. He described the reaction of senior rangers when he first encountered one. They told him not to go near it, not to touch it, not to climb it under any circumstances. When he asked why, they didn't have an answer. They just said that's the rule. Everyone who works in the backcountry long enough learns that rule, and nobody remembers where it came from. Now, here's what's important to understand. These posts were published on r/nosleep, which is a subreddit specifically for horror fiction. Everything posted there is, by the rules of the community, treated as if it's true, but everyone understands that the stories are creative writing. The SAR poster never broke character, never confirmed or denied whether the accounts were real. The series was enormously popular, generating millions of views and spawning an entire subculture of discussion. And this is where the phenomenon gets genuinely interesting. Because after those posts went viral, people started coming forward with their own accounts, not on r/nosleep. On hiking forums, outdoor recreation groups, Appalachian Trail communities, hunting message boards, and eventually in direct messages to researchers and content creators who covered the original posts. People who had never read the Reddit series. People who had never heard of the SAR poster. People who said they'd seen staircases in the woods years, sometimes decades, before those posts were ever written. That's the part that's hard to explain away. This account comes from a long-distance hiker who was section hiking the Appalachian Trail through Virginia in 2011. 3 years before the Reddit posts existed. She shared this story on a hiking forum in 2016 after seeing the staircase discussion online and realizing she'd encountered something that matched the descriptions exactly. She was hiking solo through a section of the George Washington National Forest, about 4 days into a planned 7-day stretch. Mid-afternoon, overcast, no other hikers in sight. She'd stopped to filter water at a creek crossing when she noticed something uphill through the trees, maybe 40 yards off trail. It was a staircase. Wooden. Dark stained, like a deck staircase you'd see on the back of a suburban house. 8 or 9 steps. It was standing perfectly upright in a small gap between 2 mature oaks. No foundation, no platform at the top, no debris around the base. The bottom step was sitting flush on the forest floor, like it had been measured and leveled. She said her first thought was that it must be a remnant of some old structure, a fire tower, a homestead, something. She walked closer. There was nothing else. No foundation stones, no rotted lumber, no nails in the ground, no clearing that would suggest a building had ever been there. Just a staircase, standing in the woods. In an area that, according to her map, had never been developed. She took 2 photos on a disposable camera. She did not climb the steps, though she couldn't explain why. She said it felt like approaching a gravestone, like there was an etiquette she was violating just by being near it. She left, hiked another 3 miles to her campsite, and didn't think about it again for 5 years. When she saw the Reddit posts in 2016, she said the hair on her arms stood up. Not because the description was similar, because it was exact. The dark-stained wood, the suburban house look, the perfect leveling, the feeling of etiquette. She hadn't shared her experience with anyone in the 5 years between seeing it and reading those posts. Nobody had described it to her. She'd arrived at the same details independently. Once you start looking for staircase reports outside of the original Reddit posts, the volume is surprising. They're scattered across forums, hiking communities, and personal blogs. Many of them posted before 2014, which rules out the possibility that every single one was inspired by the SAR posters' stories. The reports cluster in certain areas, though not exclusively. The Appalachian Mountains, particularly sections running through Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee, account for the highest concentration. But accounts have also surfaced from the Pacific Northwest, the Upper Midwest, parts of the Rocky Mountains, and, increasingly, from forests in Scandinavia, the UK, and Australia. What makes the reports difficult to dismiss is their consistency. Across dozens of independent accounts from people who show no evidence of coordinating, certain details recur with uncomfortable regularity. First, the staircases are almost always freestanding. They are not attached to any structure. They are not lying on the ground as fallen debris. They are standing upright, as if a building were constructed around them and then erased, leaving only the stairs behind. Second, they vary in material and style, but they always look domestic. They resemble staircases from houses, apartments, or public buildings, not industrial, not military, not natural stone. They look like they belong inside a home. Third, the condition varies in ways that don't make sense. Some appear weathered and old, but some appear almost new, clean, undamaged, with no moss or lichen growth. No leaf litter accumulation on the steps, no evidence of exposure to the elements. And fourth, the feeling. Nearly every person who reports encountering a staircase describes an immediate, instinctive aversion. Not fear exactly, something deeper. A sense that you are looking at something that should not exist in this context. This account was submitted to us directly. A man in his 50s who grew up in rural West Virginia described a hunting trip he took with his father in the early 1990s, well over 2 decades before any internet discussion of the phenomenon. They were tracking deer on family land that bordered national forest, several hundred acres of unmanaged hardwood that his family had owned since the 1940s. He knew the property as well as anyone alive. They were about 2 miles from the nearest logging road when his father stopped walking. He was looking at something off to the right, between a stand of old hickory trees. The son followed his gaze and saw a staircase. This one was stone. Gray, rough-cut stone with a rusted iron railing on one side. 10 or 11 steps. It rose from the ground at a slight angle and ended in open air. His father stared at it for a long time without saying anything. Then he said quietly, "There's another one on the ridge above the creek. I found it in '68. Don't touch it, don't go near it. We're going to walk away now and we're not going to talk about this again." They didn't. So what are these things? After nearly a decade of public discussion, several explanations have been proposed. The most conventional explanation is that the staircases are simply remnants of old structures. A more fringe explanation suggests the staircases are access points or ventilation structures for underground government installations. Another idea is that the staircases are objects that have crossed from one location, or one version of reality, into another. And then there's a quieter theory. The staircases aren't remnants at all. They're markers, placed deliberately by something that is marking territory or boundaries. We received this account from a hiker in North Carolina who asked that we present it without editorial comment. He was day hiking in the Pisgah National Forest in the fall of 2018, solo. About 5 miles in, he found a staircase off the trail, wooden, painted white, about 12 steps. He climbed it. From the top step, the forest looked different. Not dramatically different, just wrong in subtle ways. The light didn't match the sun. The bark patterns didn't look quite right. He said it felt like standing at a doorway when you know someone is on the other side. He came back down. Everything returned to normal instantly. He had a headache for 3 days, and for 2 weeks afterward, every staircase he saw felt wrong. He said, "The rule exists for a reason." I should have listened. Here's what we know. We know the discussion began online. We know independent accounts exist that predate it. We know the descriptions are consistent. And we know experienced backcountry workers avoid these things instead of explaining them. We don't know what the staircases are. We don't know why they appear. We don't know what the rule is protecting you from. The Appalachian Mountains are old. Older than trees. Older than most life as we know it. We are new here. And maybe we don't fully understand what still exists out there. If you've seen a staircase in the woods, I want to hear about it. Because the more stories we gather, the closer we get to understanding. Or at least understanding what it isn't. Submit your story to the email in the description. And if you ever find a staircase standing alone in the woods, don't climb it.